So we can go to the other side and say, okay, what happened here that created this here that we can have something different over here? You are not broken. You are not damaged. There's nothing wrong with your brain. And there isn't anything that has happened to you in your life that we cannot take for good.
Hey now, how is everybody doing? Welcome to Red Alert Diaries with Tanya E. Hood. Today, we have a special guest joining us, Miss Elizabeth Kisser. Hey, Elizabeth, glad that you are here joining us.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
So, before we begin, I have got to introduce you to everybody. So, for those of you that have not yet met Miss Elizabeth, Elizabeth is a mental health practitioner with over 35 years of experience with neurodivergence ADHD related trauma. Her mission is to guide individuals in the exploration and resolution of life challenges stemming from ADHD, autism, and the layers of trauma. She shares that her trauma-informed ADHD counseling helps her to empower the clients she serves. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you would like to share with our audience about yourself?
Oh, thank you. It's an honor. As far back as I can remember, it's always just been my natural flow, my natural desire to connect with people, to help people be the best that they are, and just learn. One of my big things that I enjoyed doing when I was young is even connecting with seniors, hearing their stories. And they sometimes with seniors, they feel it's like, oh, I don't serve a purpose anymore. Oh, yes, they do. They always have great, juicy stories. And I always love that connection with them. And it's a beautiful thing. Yeah. So I've always loved to help support, encourage people to know that, you know what, you're valuable.
I'm glad that you're sharing that because sometimes we forget that the wealth of knowledge that our elders bring us, is this also what inspires you?
Yeah, one of the many things that do inspire me. I can remember as a child just being really misunderstood, being in the spectrum of neurodivergence of ADHD. And so, because I was misunderstood, I didn't know how to communicate. So I felt I felt rejected. I felt abandoned, and I felt chastised, ostracized. I don't want other people to feel those things. I want them to know that they are amazing. They have strengths. They have powers within them, and that they are not deficient by any means, and they definitely don't have a disability. They have superpowers, and they can grow and heal through anything.
I
And
like
just,
the fact that
yeah.
you're saying superpower because those of you that listen, you guys know I often share that we have within our soul a superpower. So tell us a little bit more because said a word. I want us to unpack the word for those that may not know what that word is. You said neurodivergent. What does
Yes.
that mean?
Well, it's a difference in our brains and how our brains work. And I have always been, I guess, somewhat of a science geek and learning. I've always loved to learn about science, about the world and our universe, and about how this works and how this works, how our brain works, and just the connection with everything. And how I love to use the word muscle memory. So often when I'm working with people, I say, get out of here because this just gets in your way. It's what's in here in the body where our muscle memory is. We remember things. And so I've always loved to study what goes on in the brain. So it's all about the brain, how the brain works. And people used to have this thought of, this is what I've got to work with. And that's how it is. It's like, this is what you have right now. And look at the amazing things that we can unfold, change, reprogram, create new paths, new circuitries, and ways that you can be that amazing person that you were brought here to be.
I'm glad you're sharing that. And here's another thing, having heard that comment that you just made in your background, you have the words somatic life recoding. that somatic element people aren't connecting because that's not a word that we typically see. And
Right?
neuroplasticity, that's not something that people often think about. Tell us a little bit more, unpack that a little bit so we can get more connected to what you're talking about with the head and
Yeah.
the heart.
These days we hear so much about DNA and stem cell research and all these sort of things. And we know what coding is. I mean, there's Morse code, there's Braille code, all of these different things. It's a code, it's our DNA. But we can reprogram the code which is in us. Somatic is about what goes on in the body. And so that's where that thing of muscle memory comes in. I can give a great example. When I was much younger, there was a little black Scottish terrier toddling off, going through a walk, and I had a dog, and it came running into my yard and went to go after my dog. I put my hand out, and it bit me. And it's like, fortunately, I said, "Ow, that's me," and he let go. But in my body remember every time it's like, see, little black Scottish terrier, danger, danger. My mind didn't remember that, but that's a part of the somatics. It's what lives in the body. And so our experiences in life create the behaviors, the patterns, the thoughts, and the beliefs that we have. And so we want to take those things that are sitting in the body from our life that interfere and get in the way of the things that we want to do, the things that we feel that we need to be doing, or that we have the desire to do, but we're not doing, or we have unhealthy patterns because of these things. We get in there and we say, okay, we work here, not here. Because this just gets in the way and confuses things when we're all in the mind. So, so somatic is about working with the body and about the things in our life and just taking that, recoding it, very much like what people would do with stem cell research or with DNA research, is we're changing things. And with the brain, it is just, it's called neuroplasticity because it's just like plasticine. You can play with it, you can stretch it, you can move it, and you can create more with it. And
Let's pause
it's,
there because
yeah,
we have to unpack a little bit of that because I primarily speak to divorcees. And after the midst of that trauma, the last thing that any of us typically want to, because I said it, I'm not doing this thing called marriage again. That's because the body is keeping score of the pain and the trauma. And we don't often think that if I open myself up again to one somebody and that happens, oh, I'm not opening. Give us one something that the audience can take away to say, hey, this is what the body is feeling, but this is what you can do to change the trajectory of your life.
yeah, yeah. And I love that example is like, I'm not doing this again. Whereas in the body saying, what do I have to learn from this? What can I see? There's a whole lot more going on than what happened just in this little segment. Because there was life stuff that happened before that that opened up the doors to be in this experiment. Oh, that's interesting. How did that word come up? This experiment, this segment of life. So we can go to the other side and say, okay, what happened here that created this here that we can have something different over here? So it just because you had an experience that you perceived to be negative, that you perceived as like, no, this wasn't good. It's like nothing is ever 100% bad. There is both sides because we wouldn't know darkness without light. We wouldn't know sorrow without joy. There's two sides. So finding where was the positive in that, we can neutralize this, see where the good was, and see where we learned what happened before that led to this, so that we can create something better on the other side. Because God never meant for us to go through the rest of our lives being angry, cranky, bitter, resentful, because that just hurts our body. And that's not what He wants for us.
I'm glad that you're sharing that part because I know having heard this thought process of what you're sharing and tying it into that's not what God intended for our lives. That was how I got out of it. Let's unpack that a little bit because a lot of people are like, well, I need something physical. I don't need an ethereal conversation about how God is going to get me through it because He doesn't want me to have it. The body gives us an idea about how to tap into that inner element. And you share that there are some symptoms that arise in our bodies from the trauma that we experience. sometimes people manifest that as ADHD because I think I've been told because I have the undiagnosed ADHD. Because growing up, I had some experiences of like, okay, this is what happened, but this is how I dealt with it. But here's the breakthrough. Talk a little bit more about how we can physically see that breakthrough and not have a thorough conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, part of having that breakthrough is to realize what were the patterns that led up to it. Sometimes we have to go way back, and sometimes we can just take a segment of a section. So, for example, I had the first experience, well, when I was molested by my stepbrother. Happened to be the first night that I met my stepbrother and my stepmom. And I carried anger and resentment for years towards her, for as a 7-year-old child crying out, saying, I want to go home, I want to go home, but not knowing, well, how do I express words? Excuse me, this is what I experienced. I don't feel safe. And so as a result, my body then manifested irritable bowel syndrome because of the anger and resentment that I was carrying. So the body will speak and say, okay, we've got this trauma here. All right, you got irritable bowel syndrome, and you're angry towards these situations. And it's like, oh my gosh, what was that? And we focus on something else to try to distract our mind. And maybe we get started on something, we're going somewhere. It's like, oh, this is touching something sensitive. Hey, this looks interesting. Let's check this out. Distraction factor. And sometimes it's a matter of this here that's coming up right now that may not be in my mind, but it's in my body. My body is trying to tell me something, is trying to get me back into that place of homeostasis and a balance. But you're ignoring your body. And you take a sidetrack saying, no, you know what? This isn't stimulating me anymore. This is now boring. I'm going to go another path.
Let's pause because
Yeah.
there's several things that you're bringing up. First, so sorry that you've gone through that, but I also understand a little bit more about why you were
I'm
sharing
not.
this insight. We don't know how much our body holds the pain and holds the trauma. There's a book called The Body Keeps Score.
Yeah, I love that book.
And hearing what you're saying, you have shared, and I never thought about this that much because when I was a young girl, my grandmother had to raise me because my mother couldn't. And for individuals that have like natural, logical, analytical brain like mine, I think so fast and so many things, and I did not have the words to truly help the adults understand I didn't like what was happening in my world. How do I make these adjustments? And for divorcees now, they don't like what happened. If I can just do this instead of focus on that, I don't have to deal with the hurt that this relationship has impacted and left me. But they're walking through some physical manifestations. Is that why you were sharing that the trauma that we have in our lives can cause us to have those ADHD moments? And that is the piece that you talk about treating and giving some insight on? You want to go deeper there?
Yeah, I would love to. Yes, because as when people that have manifest symptoms of ADHD, sometimes it can be so extreme that they can't even function to go through their day, especially without meds. And there is definitely a place for meds. I will never say take them. I will never say don't take them. The individual is the specialist of their body as to what they need to do. But the more upset they are about a situation, the more distracted their mind is going to be, and they're not going to be clear on the simple things. When my uh, when my second husband was in a skydiving accident and survived, I was trying so desperately to phone a friend, and I could not phone for anything. And it was over one simple little thing. I forgot that I needed to dial 1 before the area code. And so, of course, the more upset and the more trauma that we have, the more frustration around us. We're not breathing properly. So our body's not getting oxygen. Our brain is becoming oxygen deprivated. And so we're not thinking clearly. The less we're breathing properly, I always say, oxygen is life. We need to get the oxygen in so that we can think clearly, so that we can calm, and then we can deal with these different things. And then, of course, because a person might not be in a state of clear thinking because they're upset, they're not thinking clearly, so then they might make more mistakes. It's like, oh my gosh, I did not see that wall there that I just walked into. Now I hit it. Now I'm hurting there too. There goes my frustration level, goes up higher. So different little things can compound. So it's almost like putting a blanket on 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 a blanket. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so smothered. How do I get out of all these layers of blankets? And all you need to do is just softly wiggle your way out and go, okay, let's take this layer off. Let's
Yeah.
take this layer off.
That's part of the thing that I try to share with my clients, because I often share there's only 2 points that I talk about: when things are going well and when we're into conflict. And when we're in conflict, it's those layers that you were just talking about. And because of that, we don't know what to do. So our vision gets narrower and narrower. When
Yeah.
you're talking about this, you're stating that the brain, because vision is getting narrow, everything is shutting down because we're getting more tense. That body piece that you were sharing. Breathe is one thing that I heard that you shared that people can do now to help them know that they're safe, know that they're
Exactly.
going to get through this. But going back to something else that I've heard you share, when you get them finally to calm down, settle their soul, you said that you have this way that you can see around them, the experiences that they have that they are walking into. Tell us a little
Yeah.
bit more about what you see and how that's coming about.
It's a beautiful gift that all of us have. So when we connect with Holy Spirit and we open up our mind and just relax and say, okay, Lord, what would you have? He will open up and he shows things. And he can, because we are meant for connection. And so I believe we are all connected. And that includes when someone's in that place, it's like, okay, let's just get that oxygen into the lungs. Then things start to settle down and calm. And I will get that in them in that place where they're breathing, the oxygen is coming in, and I will actually close my eyes. I will breathe with them. And then it's as if I can feel, instead of this, going like this. And I feel that like God just all of a sudden pulls back this dark curtain and shows me something. And I feel like I'm right in there with the picture with them. I can see different objects. So I will ask them, for example, say, Tanya, let's do a scan of your body. Are you feeling something somewhere? And you might say, yeah, right here in my shoulder. It's like, okay, let's connect with that. Let's breathe into it. And that there's a representation of that. And so God is really good about showing me. It's like, okay, what's that representation? And we talk about it. And before the person knows it, they're without, they're no longer in here, but their body, what's being carrying here is usually they're carrying a weight on their shoulders. It opens up and suddenly they're able to speak. I feel this burden because of, not even because of ABC, it's just I feel this burden. And even talking about what's the temperature, what's the texture, what's the warmth, it opens up so many things to revelation and understanding. And Revelations is a book of like, what?
That
Talk
part.
about pulling back the curtains and showing us stuff. And that's exactly what happens. It's like God opens up all these things. So he sends his angels to say, look at this, look at this, look at this. It's like,
That
and
piece.
all of a
See,
sudden
that's the
I
part
look
that's the
behind now, it's like,
connecting part.
look, yeah, because the angels are meant to serve us as messengers. And so, because I'm able to relax and be present with Holy Spirit, with God, and say, what would you show me? He opens my eyes spiritually. And sometimes I will see several angels around a person. I will see wings around them. I will see them pointing to things. And I will ask this
Mm.
person, tell me what you are seeing. And they will describe exactly a figure standing over this shoulder looking like this. And I'll say, I'm sensing that it is this color or that or that. And it's like, yeah.
And this is a piece that gets back to some of the beliefs that we have that we don't pay enough attention to. And you taking that moment, that one physical element that you shared, you and I have a basic belief that we are designed in the image of the creator of the universe. And when God created us, he blew his breath into our being. So the
Exactly.
first manifestation that you shared as a technique, whether you believe in the God we serve or not, is to breathe. You are breathing in God's breath. And then that takes us to this next part about what do you believe? Because I often share, you have to know how you're working through this thing called life. And you do so by having a better relationship with yourself, so you
Mhm.
can have a better relationship with others. And the being that helps you have a better relationship with everything around you, I feel, is Jesus Christ. Because that physical thing that you just talked about, all of us walk through that experience. And I was learning that it's God's breath. And then tying it into the conversation about revelation, the revelation that we often get that there's something beyond this moment. And you have that conversation beyond ADHD, beyond this moment. There's something greater. Beyond this moment, I will be healed. Beyond this moment, I don't have to continue to let this burden continue to be on my back. Elizabeth, thank you for sharing that. I want to unpack a little bit more because that was one technique that we can share with the audience. Breathe. And it
Yes.
ties into our spiritual being and allowing what you believe to support you on the journey. What other
Yeah.
elements can they do? One more thing that they can tap into to know that the spiritual and the physical, when you connect the relationship, oh, there's deliverance there.
Oh my gosh, is there ever? Yes. And we all have belief systems, and it's all like, what are you making it mean? What is your perception? So, sometimes someone will perceive that it's something is negative, or it is positive. But like you mentioned, we are created in his image. And Jesus said, all of these things that you've seen me do, you will do and more. So when we cannot perceive and we have a thought or an image in our mind, if it's not lining up with what God says, then it's step back. Okay, God says, I am fearfully and well, actually, the song says, I am fearfully and wonderfully created, and this my spirit knows well. Well, then get out of here and get into here, line up with Holy Spirit says, I am created fearfully and wonderfully. So connect with that, knowing that we are meant to see these things because God gave us that.
I love that you share that because when you look at Psalm 139, knowing that God says that you are amazing, and here's the thing that I want to share as well. Sometimes when we're in the middle of that mess, learning that our body's keeping score, so we've got that understanding today, recognizing that there are some physical things that we can do, but it's the spiritual element that we need to connect. And sometimes it just means you've got to believe what God says about you. I didn't understand me anymore. In the aftermath of my divorce, I lost Tanya. I forgot some elements of my being, forgot some stuff about what I was good at. And it wasn't until I went back to the book and I was reading, and I got it in Jeremiah chapter 1, when God said, I knew you
Yeah.
before you were formed in your mother's womb. So if the creator of the universe knew me beforehand, then something else I'm missing. And I asked God to tell me more about me. Because if you want to know how something works, you go to the manufacturer. So when I went to the manufacturer and asked him, what did you put in me? What strengths do I bring to the table? What purpose am I supposed to bring into the earth? Because my grandmother often told me, anytime God wanted to get the world to a better place, a baby was birthed in the earth with gifts, skills, and talents. I forgot mine. Couldn't figure it out. And the Bible gives us 18 different spiritual gifts that we can tap into. Tell us a little bit more about when you discovered what God was saying about your being, because there's also a statement that he says we're a masterpiece. And you started
Yes.
trusting that, started believing in that, so that you can reprogram your brain and start transforming, which is what you support others in doing.
And it was an interesting journey for me. And it was in my last marriage of over 12 years. And oh, I was in pain. And then somebody gave me some very wise words of wisdom. And every morning and several times through the day, when I just felt, no, this is too dark, it hurts too much, I would say, Father, thank you that you have promises and gifts for me, that your word and your promises, yes and amen, that I'm fearfully and wonderfully created. And I thank you for the promises that you have in me through Christ Jesus, and that I am one day closer to that. I am one step closer. I am one step closer. I am one step closer. And now when I reflect back on that, how must have been 8 years ago now, I think I'm one step closer. I'm one step closer. And I would not go back and change a single day in my life. I would not go back and not marry the man I was married to, because I learned and grew so much through there. I would not go back and change meeting my stepbrother, my stepmom, and going through that process of the abuse, because it was through that I learned love, compassion, and to see through other people's eyes that some people say, yeah, hurting people hurt people. There's no such thing as a bad child. It's what happened to that person that made them behave this way. And I wouldn't have these perceptions. I wouldn't be able to help the people that I help if I've not gone through that and looked from different angles and looked through different lenses and seen them through God's eyes and realized we're all connected.
I love that, because another thing that this taps into is what you were sharing. You said that we are multidimensional beings, and having an experience where we heal one area of our life, we can take the time and heal others. So thank you so much for sharing so much of what your past area, which has now moved you into a direction where you're supporting others heal in their other areas. So I want to ask you this. There's something that you said that you wanted to have as a special gift to share with my audience. Having had this conversation, what do you want to share with them?
Oh, you know what? I always love to help people be the best that they can be, help them grow, whether it be in their own self, if it's self-regulation, if it's in their relationships with communication or with their children, or just how to just do something better to the next level. I always have gifts that I like to offer. So if people want to reach out to me, tell me, what is your challenge? I will send you some free resources to help with that. But always remember, breathe. It's one of my biggest resources I give for breathing. And it can be hard to breathe when you're closed up like this, like a tight shell. So I like to tell people, sit up tall, put your hands underneath your thighs. And when you do that, you can't help but to sit tall. Your shoulders go back, your lungs are open, your ribs are open, and oh, the air you can take in like a balloon. Wow. The oxygen that you get into you calms you.
And that technique is something that I'm hoping that you guys use. I hadn't thought about the fact that if you do that, you are sitting taller, because when you expand the breadth of your being, here's another thing that it does. Talking about, you said earlier, superpower. You know how Superman has that stance?
The
His,
Wonder Woman
yes,
stand.
the stance helps your chest expand so that you feel a little strength. You get some element of who you are, that piece that we were talking about. For those of you that believe like we believe, That to me is often the lifting of God saying, hey, I am the creator of the universe. And you, as my child, designed in my image, brings with you a certain oomph to the earth as well. So I want to say thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing that. Let me ask you, because we're going to have to start wrapping this up. What is there one last thing that you would love for the audience to take away today?
You are amazing. You're not broken. You are not damaged. There's nothing wrong with your brain. And there isn't anything that has happened to you in your life that we cannot take for good. Because we in Romans 8:28, nothing is wasted. It tells us that nothing is wasted. You may go through traumas and challenges, but it is all for the greater glory of God. We can take what we've been through in our struggles and be better, learn, and help others. There's always room for growth.
So, Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you so much for the empowerment that you are sharing with others. So, those of you that are watching, I need you to go to her website, agapetransitions.com. And for the conversation, that free resource that Elizabeth was sharing with you earlier, just email her at agapetcc1@gmail.com. agapetcc1@gmail.com. I'm going to put that down there below. But Elizabeth, thank you so much for that. And so for today, if you don't remember anything else we've shared, here's the one thing we want you to know. Inside of your being, there's a spirit that resides in you that helps you connect your physical and your spiritual. And that is how you will often get to your breakthrough. Those physical elements that we try to think, what do I need to do? It will help you release what the body is keeping score over. But you'll also have the thoughts where your head and your heart, a place where it can connect. And for those of you that believe, like we believe, Jesus gives you that connecting point because that is where God poured out his deity into the body of Jesus, showing you that there is a connecting factor. And it is there that you'll get the chance to know more of who you are at the core of your being. If you want someone to join you on the journey, feel free to go to my website, TanyaEHood.com. There you can click with me and see all the various ways that we can work with one another. And I'm hoping that you guys know to come back and join us because every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we go live. And Elizabeth is going to try to join us. She's got a couple things going on, but we'll get the opportunity to extend the conversation. In the meantime, this is Tanya E. Hood, walking in my purpose, and I want you to do the same.